In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. An old hunting trick once used by ancient hunters was to stampede a herd of animals into a box canyon, rope or fence them in, and then kill them one at a time. I think that's a fitting analogy for what I want to talk to you about. Because you are being herded into a box canyon, while at the same time, climate change is accelerating its negative effects throughout the United States. Already, descendants of slaves have the lowest life expectancy in the United States, and more specifically in the southern states. And that life expectancy rate is going to get even lower. If you have moved to, or if you are thinking of moving, or if you now live in the southern states, you are consigning your life to one of misery by disease, poverty, and ultimately a premature death. Western industrialization has lowered us into a deep cesspool. It is not your fault, but it is true. We are literally living out our lives in the waste of the industries, food, water, and air we live in, through, and around, as well as the technologies we use and which we throw away into our own personal habitats. As is generally the case in all of the United States and its cities, descendants of slaves and other poor people are disproportionately stressed by pollution and the diseases which are caused by pollution. I'd like you to study this map. Look at it carefully. Observe the parallel lines crossing the United States horizontally. Notice that the area inside of it includes the southern states. The southern states are now stressed by increasing climate change. And even now, as I speak to you, there is a massive hurricane called Harvey stressing the state of Texas. One collateral effect of climate change is a rise in the average annual temperature throughout the United States, and that has been recorded for every year since 2001. By the end of this century, average temperatures throughout America may increase as high as 3 degrees Fahrenheit. When temperature level rises, the whole ecosystem becomes stressed, even when there is more than enough water. In fact, high temperatures and rain levels trigger the movement of bacteria, viruses, and fungi to expand their feeding grounds into our living spaces. Even now, fungi are spreading throughout the southern states as heat and humidity levels rise. Fungal bacteria infect body parts and kills over 1.5 million people worldwide every year. And there is no vaccine to treat fungal infections, some of which are transmitted sexually. We should also know that it's not just the viruses, bacteria, and fungi that we learn about today. Ecologists and biologists have successfully taken out of ice cores from the polar regions the viruses which lived millions of years ago. They have successfully reanimated those viruses in their laboratories. Those viruses are still contagious after awakening from their hibernation. All the large animals we read about, the dinosaurs, the large mammals, and birds, which lived millions of years ago, were infected by those viruses which have been discovered buried deep in the ice and which were found hibernating. Global warming will reanimate those viruses and bacteria which have not plagued animals for millions of years. Viruses which killed dinosaurs will cause horrific health problems in our lives and terrible deaths. A well-known virus today is dengue. Look at the map. The map identifies where dengue is spreading today. Most descendants of slaves live in those southern states. All the southern states will be saturated with the dengue virus. It is spreading its habitat at a rate of about 5 miles per year. You do the calculations, and you figure out how fast dengue will be in your environment. As temperatures increase in the southern states, that rate of movement of dengue into the southern states will increase. It will cause hundreds of thousands of descendants of slaves to become sick, and it will cause some to die. But the dengue virus is just one growing problem. We now have what are called superbugs. Superbug viruses and bacteria, which are killing thousands of American citizens every year, and oftentimes they are contracted in hospitals. It is hard to treat people who are infected with superbugs because the viruses have become resistant to traditional antibiotic treatments like penicillin. Viruses mutate quickly to fight new attempts to kill them. And the Zika virus is one example. It is spread by a mosquito and through the sperm of the male. On the surface, you may imagine that moving to the southern states will give you a renewed sense of community, which has been lost in the west and east and northeastern coasts of America. You may feel that you can experience political power in a community simply based upon a large population of descendants of slaves. But the reality is that we have lived in cities wherein we were the majority population, yet here we are in a more nationally impoverished state than ever before, with no economic hope in sight. There are many reasons for our present predicament. They are both past and present reasons, but for the most part, we have been betrayed by incompetent and self-serving political and religious leadership, as well as entertainment leadership of all those presented before us by the mass media. Mass media products put before us to divert our attention and to purposely mislead us. A recent example is Andrew Young, but there are hundreds of them like Andrew Young at the national and local levels. The quality of our lives is being and will continue to be severely stressed by both new and ancient viruses and bacteria, let alone the political and economic stress that we have been subject to since we were enslaved in the United States. The future is now. Our lives will be cut short, and we may even face ethnic extinction because of what is beginning to plague the United States, and particularly the southern states first. We have a massive burden on our shoulders. For example, descendants of slaves are plagued today with massive amounts of sexually transmitted diseases, as reported by the Center for Disease Control. And even the bubonic bacteria carried by fleas has recently infected people because more and more descendants of slaves are living literally on the streets and in alleyways where they are in direct contact with gutter rats, wild dogs, and cats and their waste. It is a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. There are many reasons for our nightmarish predicament. We can point to a breakdown in two-parent family structures, which are the most efficient ways today to supervise children and to shore up surplus income, to avoid extreme poverty. There is the lack of authentic culture, the loss of basic hygienic training due to the large school dropout rate in cities throughout the United States, such as Detroit, Oakland, California, Los Angeles County, and others. There's the problem of teenage serial sexual relations, drug and alcohol addiction, weakening of the immune system due to poor food. But the fact is that sexually transmitted disease rates are at plague levels among descendants of slaves' youth population. To change all of that, washing your hands will not be enough. We should change our lifestyles, and we should change where we choose to live. Many descendants of slaves will live with sexually transmitted diseases until their death, because there will be no medicines to treat them. These are some of the terrible prospects that we must pay attention to, because we are now at a hinge period, not only in the history of the United States, but in the history of humanity. We are at the end of the interglacial period, that warming period between ice ages. It is that period which we have studied as the history of recent humanity, and all of the art and written literature and philosophy and science that has been created. But now that period is coming to an end. But accelerating the demise of our climate is the accelerated pumping of carbon dioxide and methane into our environment, causing an accelerated warming, not only of the atmosphere, but of our oceans, and causing rapid melting of the glaciers and ice caps on our planet, and that in turn causing an increasing desalinization of our oceans, which will slow down the Gulf Stream and possibly bring it to a halt. We are in a crisis mode, and we, descendants of slaves, must begin to think that we must develop methods and means to meet this new challenge so that we can survive. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.